Insert it, okay. A rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. 4 congruent sides. We'll be drawing some pictures here in a moment. So, all right, a square then has 4 congruent sides and what? 4 right angles.
The rhombus and the rectangle.
All right.
And they named it square.
The rhombus corollary. So here we go. A rhombus, a quadrilateral, is a rhombus if and only if it has 4 congruent sides. So, okay, it can only be called a rhombus if it has 4 congruent sides. Could a square be called a rhombus?
Yes.
Yes, it could be. Okay. A quadrilateral is a rectangle if and only if it has 4 right angles. The square corollary says a quadrilateral is a square if and only if it is a rhombus and a rectangle. Isn't that cute? That's the baby. So we can draw that. 4 right angles, 4 congruent sides. Okay? So they got together. All right. For any rectangle, A, B, C, D, decide whether the statement is always true or sometimes true and explain your reasoning. For me, I'm kind of visual, so I like to draw a picture. I'm going to make sure I label the letters in the correct order as they were given, A, B, C, D. Okay. Now, it says, can we say that AB is congruent to CD for any rectangle? For this, well, can we always, sometimes, or never?
It could be always.
Okay, why do we know that?
Because you're opposite. Parallel.
Because all rectangles are parallelograms. And we know about parallelograms that the opposite sides are congruent. So, always, all rectangles are parallelograms. And opposite sides of, I'm going to draw the little parallelogram symbol, are congruent. How about the next one? Can we say that AB is congruent to BC? Sometimes. When can we say it? It's a square. Sometimes, if rectangle ABCD is a square. Not all rectangles are squares. Okay? Don't understand? It's just a little vague. All right. Okay, more theorems. Here we go. A parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if its diagonals are perpendicular. So, there's a rhombus. Actually, they told us it was a parallelogram, so let's just draw our little parallel things. So, if we know it's a parallelogram, and we are told that the diagonals are perpendicular, that mine aren't exactly perpendicular, but they have that little square there. If you're told that, then you can say that that's a rhombus, that parallelogram is a rhombus. All right. A parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. So I'm going to draw this really small. And I'm going to draw the angles here. That diagonal then would bisect that angle, making those two pieces congruent. And then this diagonal would bisect these angles, making those two pieces congruent. Yeah?
No.
Not necessarily in a rhombus. If it was a square, yes. Okay. A parallelogram is a rectangle if and only if its diagonals are congruent. So, okay, let's draw what that looks like. So I'm going to draw these diagonals, but I'm also going to label this A, B, C, D. And they told me it was a parallelogram, so I should probably draw these things, which I didn't do on the other one. I can say if its diagonals are congruent, it would look like this. AC is congruent to BD. If I'm told that, then I can say it's a rectangle for sure. Okay, a quadrilateral has 4 congruent sides and 4 congruent angles. Sketch the quadrilateral and classify it. Classify means to name it. So which one would it be? It has to be a square. That's the only one that meets all those requirements. Okay, a quadrilateral has opposite angles congruent and a pair of adjacent sides congruent. Sketch the quadrilateral and classify it. What do you think? Does a rhombus qualify? Yeah, it does, because a rhombus is a parallelogram, so we know that the opposite angles are congruent. But a rhombus also has congruent adjacent sides, right? Adjacent next to each other. But we could also draw what? Another one. We could also say a square too. It meets that same requirement. So we could just say this. Opposite angles are congruent and adjacent sides are congruent. All right. Write everything you know about a square. Well, there's some obvious ones. What's an obvious one?
That all sides and angles
All 4 sides are congruent. What's another obvious one?
Oh, angles are.
All 4 angles are 90 degrees. All right, now we've got to start looking at some of this other stuff that we've just learned. So, yes,
All of the interior angles have to be.
they do. They do. You can add that. We can add that if you want. Add to 360. Here's another one we know. Since a square can be classified as a rectangle and a rhombus, okay, we're going to look at the diagonals here. It can be classified as a rhombus. We'll start with rhombus. So the diagonals are perpendicular. And in any parallelogram, what do the diagonals do? Bisect each other. And the diagonals do what to the angles in a rhombus? Bisect the opposite angles, right? So all of those things come from the rhombus. Okay, there's one more. A square can also be considered a rectangle, so what else can we say about its diagonals?
That they are diagonals.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Can be classified as a rectangle, so diagonals are congruent. So all of those things qualify for a square. Okay, it says you are building a case with glass shelves for could be Colin, could be college,
Or
could be whatever, I don't know. Collection, I don't know, I just put college. I don't know what happened there, but I got cut off. Colin, whatever you want it to be, okay? Given the shelf measurements in the diagram, can you assume that the shelf is a square?
No.
Why?
Because the angle.
Because we don't know anything about the angles. No. The four congruent sides, so it's a rhombus, but we don't know about the right angles. We don't know right angles. However you want to write that. Okay, well then it says you measure the diagonals and find that they are both 33.94 inches. What can you conclude about the shape then? Because of this, right? Yep, and the sides are all congruent, and if the diagonals are congruent, it's got to be a square. It is a square. So what you're going to do today is you're going to just be using all of these different things to answer questions about rhombuses, squares, and rectangles.